Hi. Welcome to the narration for a piece I'm calling Emancipation and It Feels So Good, or How to Draw Harley Quinn in Procreate 5. The title here is a play off the new movie that's coming out, the Birds of Prey, I believe it's called, but there was a kind of a subtitle, The Emancipation of Harley Quinn. So let's just take a moment here and talk about exactly who Harley Quinn is. First of all, I'm referring to the comic book character, not the daughter of Kevin Smith, Harley Quinn Smith, as her full name is. So Harley Quinn, again, is a comic book character out of the DC universe associated with Batman, also known as a supervillain or the girlfriend of Joker. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the new movie is meant to kind of capitalize on this idea that she has broken up with the Joker, is now out on her own. And the costume that I've drawn her in is kind of a direct reference to that new movie that's coming out. I'm looking forward to seeing it. The jacket she's wearing was a lot of fun to draw, so I'm kind of looking forward to, again, to kind of seeing the movie and seeing how that costume kind of plays out in real life, because I only had a couple of photographs to go off of otherwise. By the time I drew this, the only thing that I've seen so far is a trailer for the upcoming movie, so I didn't really have a whole lot to go on in terms of reference or anything like that. Now, I will say that this is also an attempt to start to kind of bridge the gap between some of the more cartoony kind of stuff that I've been doing and getting into something of a more pinup type of an area. Pinups, if I'm being honest, are a little bit tricky for me. I think they're a beautiful piece of art. I think the female body is an amazing thing to be able to draw and draw accurately, because those curves have to be just right. And, the beauty, I think, of pinup is that it can be somewhat sexy, but not necessarily over the top, because there's usually like an implied sexiness that's not so forward and in your face. Now, I don't know that I necessarily would call this a sexy pinup pose, but it is one of those first attempts to start taking a look at female anatomy, which again is something I've tended to struggle with a little bit, and trying to get it in an area where I can get those curves down and hopefully start rendering something that can borderline into that kind of coy, teasing sexuality for future pinups. There's some things that I like about my style of drawing when it comes to that sort of thing, and there are things that I think I'm still struggling with and I need to work on, which is why my first attempt at this was Harley Quinn in something of a more comic book-esque type pinup. I'm kind of trying to, swim my lane, so to speak, and attempt to try to kind of graduate into new and more challenging stuff, so to speak. So here's the challenge here. Again, female form, getting the curve in the hourglass right, as far as that female figure is concerned. I tell you, I've studied anatomy for a while. I know the basics, and I can draw decent female form, but what I struggle with is that attempt to make it look almost lifelike. My figures tend to look a little bit stiff and robotic, and I don't know that I necessarily love what I do with her hair either. It also looks very fake, as opposed to some of the other areas like her flesh tones that might have come off a little bit more realistic. So there's a lot of work to do here, but ultimately you learn by doing, and that was the whole point here. If I'm being transparent, this is probably my 6th or 7th attempt at trying to draw Harley Quinn. There were at least 2 attempts that were trying to draw caricatures of Margot Robbie, and even though I kind of got the face down, again, I struggled with the body on this a little bit and kept starting over and backing out and saying this isn't good enough, and starting over from scratch again after getting frustrated. There were several times where I just actually put my tablet down. I have been struggling to kind of try to get something halfway decent now for about a week or so now, and it is kind of par for the course sometimes with drawing. I have found that I've kind of hit a brick wall with certain things, and if I'm not happy with it, I will walk away from it and try to come back later. And this is one of those projects that have really stalled me for quite a while. And the only reason I'm publishing it now is because it's barely passable in my opinion. It doesn't really meet my standard, but it's a way to get it out of my head so I can move on to other projects, because until I do that, I'm going to be stuck staring at it and going, how do I rework this until I go absolutely insane? So I've actually got about 3 or 4 different projects I'm working on right now, aside from the Harley Quinn. I've got 2 other pieces that are really kind of occupying a lot of my time, because I'm running into that block again where I'm kind of hit this wall where I have some ideas, but they're a little bit ambitious for my skill set, and so I'm going back to the drawing board literally and figuratively over and over and over again. When I lay down sketches, think I've got something, start developing it and realize it's not going where I want, and then I kind of trash it, start over, and etc. And again, I think what the problem is here is I'm being a little bit too ambitious. One of the projects is actually 4 people squeezed into one piece. The other one is 3 people on a boat. I don't know why, but the composition there is something I'm having a little bit of trouble with, trying to squeeze all that in a frame. And if I can get these things to work and I end up publishing them instead of just kind of giving up on them, I think I'll be pretty impressed with what I'll come up with, assuming I kind of get it to a point where I feel like it's worthy of development to the end. So that's about where I'm at that point. I will let you know that, again, the idea here is to start getting into some pinups in the near future. Harley is just the first attempt at this, and I'll start trying to work on female form a little bit more later on to try to bring more of those into the channel. I certainly like doing some of the work that I've been doing up until this point, which is kind of like the movie star caricature aesthetic. But problem is, I haven't really seen any good blockbuster movies that really have inspired me lately, so pinup is kind of a backup plan for some other ideas that I have kind of brewing around in my head. Now, if I can speak a little bit to drawing Harley, I will say that it's probably important that I point out that I wasn't really going for any particular Harley that already exists, whether that be in the movies, in the comic book, a cartoon, or otherwise. I recently subscribed to the DC Universe channel. There's a whole Harley thing going on there where she's got 2 or 3 different series going on. And again, this is not really meant to be any of them other than an inspiration for the costume. I drew her in my style, and that doesn't really look like anything else that I've seen kind of in any other medium out there. Again, the costume itself being the exception of the rule in that one. I did use photographic reference from the movie trailer to get the costume down, although I didn't match the colors exactly. Her pink top is, I believe, a little bit more neon, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I was just used as more of an inspiration than anything else. It wasn't kind of a direct copy, so to speak. Now, there is also the heart tattoo on the cheek, which is also reminiscent of Margot Robbie in the way that she plays the character. But again, these are just kind of influences brought from a bunch of different places, whether it be comic, cartoon, or also the movie, kind of amalgamating them into something that I'm kind of calling uniquely my own. So, speaking to the arm there really quick, you'll notice what's happening right now. The arm is cut off and she looks like she's missing the arm, but it's because it's in the sleeve of a coat that I'm starting to paint in right now. Again, this costume came from the new movie that's coming out, and that's really kind of what helped inspire it, was this coat right here. This massive amount of multicolored fringe really just I thought was amazing, and I really had a great time painting it in and trying to come up with some ways to kind of paint it in that weren't very typical to a kind of a bold black outline kind of style that I'm used to. So I decided not to kind of draw it out and just freehanded with a bunch of strips of color coming in, layer after layer after layer. I thought the effect was really neat. It broke up some of the big bold black outline otherwise that in some places works and in some places I don't care for, and it creates some interest for the overall piece. I'm pretty happy with it. Now, one other thing about Harley's body or form here. Again, this is Harley in my style, so it's been certainly inspired by others that are out there, but I think if you take a look at my version versus some of the others that are out there, you may find that my version, her body is a little bit heavier than some of the other versions you may see in comic books. She tends to be very, very stick thin with like protruding hip bones and some of the other versions of her. And certainly Margot Robbie is a good example of that as well. She's a very, very thin woman. I don't particularly like drawing women like that. And again, it's very popular in comic books, don't get me wrong. And you know, for somebody that's meant to be like the superhero with the quintessential six-pack, I guess that makes sense. I did try to kind of give her a little bit of a form in terms of a shadow underneath her rib cage, but I also wanted to put something of a roll on her hip there where her love handle is, and I think it belongs there, and I like it there. I also try to give her a little thickness in her shoulders and in her upper arm as well, as a means of just putting a little bit of weight on her body. I think she looks attractive like that, and again, the idea here is that I'm going for more of a pseudo pinup approach, even though again I'm not kind of calling her out as purely sex on a stick or anything. I do think that she is somewhat teasing in the sensuality area, and in that case, I think it's okay that I add a little bit of weight to her, because that's what I personally find to be attractive when it comes to these pinup style pieces. I've commented on this before, but I want to point it out one more time because I know I get a lot of questions about it. But there is a gray blob sitting up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. You will see it joined by a couple of other colored blobs as the piece progresses, and this is really just my palette. I put it on a layer all by itself up at the top of the layer stack, so to speak. And it's so that way I have the ability to kind of come back and pull out the colors that I'm using for shadows and for light sources. There'll be 2 dark blobs, 1 light blob. It's just generally how I work. I usually get 1 light source in some sort of an overlay or similar blend mode, and then I'll have 2 shadows, both in multiply. 1 kind of a lighter shadow and 1 a dark shadow that gets borderline black for the areas where there's really just no light penetration at all. Because I'm working in blend modes, multiply, and etc., getting back to find those colors can be a little bit challenging and require you to kind of change settings on layers, which can be time consuming. So I cheat it just by putting a palette together like that. And honestly, it's probably something I should do with all my colors, but it's just the method in which I work. So I work where I lay down a whole bunch of flats, then add shadow, light, and just kind of get done with it that way. To make this a little bit more obvious that we're speaking of Harley Quinn, I also put the blue and the red running makeup down her eyes and similar tint to the tips of her hair. I think that without it, there might have been a hard sell on who this was. The heart tattoo on the cheek might have been the dead giveaway, but I really kind of tried to make sure that there were some things in there that spoke to the idea that this was Harley, and some of it was just kind of getting lost. I tried to get her face to be very white and pale compared to the rest of her body, indicating that she's wearing some sort of like a white clown pancake makeup, but I just couldn't get it to read the way that I wanted it to, so this was kind of a way of solving that problem. And that's really what I think artwork is kind of all about. When you're an artist and you're trying to develop a piece, it's really just a series of problem-solving techniques that you're employing over and over and over again. I'm going to draw this, but now I've run into this problem. How do I solve it and pull off the effect? Now I've figured that one out, or at least to the best of my ability. Now I'm going to move on to this next thing, and now I've run into another brick wall. How do I solve this problem? And problem after problem after problem, you try to figure out tricks and ways and methods of solving it so you can get that optical illusion and hopefully render some success here. We're coming up on the end of the piece now. So I just want to take a moment and kind of do a shameless plug and ask you to please, if you haven't done so already, subscribe and share. Get the word out about this channel. I'd really like to kind of try to get more subscribers in and get more viewership going on as well. If you have any suggestions of things you'd like to see or any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And in the meantime, have a great day. Stay tuned to the channel. We'll be having some more videos soon. Thanks and take care.